Yes, great to see you as well. I think you'll just be starting in a couple of minutes, perhaps.
Yeah. You just give me the right sign for doing the honors and the welcome remark.
Yes, exactly.
The sound is okay, because you never know. I mean, we are all in the IT age, but yeah, sometimes they also play quite a lot of tricks on you.
Yeah, you're perfectly audible now.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, thank you, and good morning, good evening to everyone for joining us today in this policy dialogue on energy security in South Asia and transition to sustainable sources that has been jointly organized by Sustainable Development Policy Institute through collaboration and support from Frederick Naumann Foundation, FNF. And we're extremely thankful and honored to have received this constant support from FNF as a part of their efforts to foster sustainable development in Pakistan. So my name is Ubaidul Rahman, and I'll be moderating the session today. But I think before we go into the discussion, and we actually request Ms. Birgit for her opening remarks, let me just set some of the housekeeping rules. So the event is being streamed live on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Speakers are encouraged to switch on their cameras, especially when they're speaking, if their network allows to do so without any disruptions. And the dialogue will be recorded and the video will be posted online on all the social media platforms. And you're all welcome to, revisit the discussion later and feel free to share it within your networks. We also invite questions from our audience and colleagues at the end of the session or as the session goes on. So the ones who have actually joined us here on the Zoom can actually put it in the Q&A box, or the rest who are joining us to different live social media platforms and a live stream can put up their questions within the comment boxes. And please have the chat box open in the window, and you can also indicate if you want to speak something by clicking the raise hand tab as well. So now I think coming towards the topic, the key theme which we're actually discussing today in the event revolves around the need for improving energy security across South Asia to transition towards sustainable and renewable energy resources, and how a very strong regional cooperation can play a very significant role in this. So based on these points and interventions from our esteemed speakers today, we'll actually try to address what is the energy scenario, how can affordability of different distributed RE can be ensured, particularly in the impoverished segments across the region, how can across border cooperation expedite this. So, a lot of themes we're actually planning to cover by taking interventions from speakers across the whole South Asia. So, now before we actually go to the discussion, let me invite Ms. Birgit Lam for her opening and welcome remarks. Ms. Birgit is currently the director of Pakistan's Office of FNF, and she has a vast experience in designing, implementing, and monitoring public policy projects. She also has a long-standing experience as an operative and executive in multinational teams and environments. So with this, I would like to hand it over to you, Ms. Birgit. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ubaid, and thank you to all the panelists and to SDPI for hosting this event. On behalf of FNF Pakistan and SDPI, I would welcome all of you, the panelists, and as well as our audience who's either now participating or might be watching the audio or recording later on. to this very pertinent topic. Advent of Pakistan works very closely on entrepreneurship and promoting a business-friendly environment here in Pakistan. And with that respect, obviously talking about energy is a crucial point, because energy is a strategic industry, which is basically used by any other industry or business cross sectors. So whatever happens in the energy sector, whether you are in trade, whether you are a manufacturer or whether you are a consumer, it affects you. And right now, talking from the Pakistani perspective, I mean, the issue of electricity bills is a huge issue that is of major concern to a lot of people here. And I'm pretty sure it's a similar thing, at least in Sri Lanka or even in Bangladesh or other parts of South Asia. And the issue of energy supply and energy shortage, after the Ukraine war, it has become like a global topic and a big buzzword. But what is like a disrupting factor in the developed industries of Western Europe, maybe, it's just like the tip of the iceberg on a more structural problem that has hampered and affected the South Asian economies for a long time already. So for South Asia, obviously, the structural issues already, there's a demographic development. So South Asia is one of the fastest growing regions in the world. That means there are more and more people who consume energy. At the same time, economic development has to keep pace with demographic development. So there's also an increasing demand in economic activity as well. And at the same time, I think all of our countries here suffer from weaknesses of the energy grid for various reasons. There are issues of maintenance, of efficiency, of effectiveness. And also, of course, you need to keep in mind that the geographical situation is different. We talk about a huge space with different geographical markings, whether it's huge deserts, whether it's mountainous areas. You will have challenges that actually hamper you when you're developing a reliable energy grid. And because of these general issues, in South Asia, 60% of the energy is actually bought from the international market. So this is where obviously, if you have a disruption, something happening like the war in Ukraine, it actually hampers these economies even more badly because they're all very much dependent on energy prices on the markets. And when the US dollar, also to your local currency, is playing havoc, then obviously it hits every industry and in the end, the consumer. So this is just something to highlight, let's say, the domestic issues, the regional issues that we have here. And in that way, also the question of energy security, and also, if you talk about the long one, the climate change issue comes into play. So how do you actually develop a reliable energy grid which serves a growing population? You need to secure wealth and prosperity, or you want to increase prosperity for the large majority of your population. And at the same time, you also want to make that sustainable, because South Asia is also one of the most sensitive regions with regard to climate change. So these are, let's say, a combination of issues which make the discussion here in South Asia quite different from the discussion that we are having in Europe or in the developed countries as well. And in that respect, I think it's a very pertinent discussion. It's a discussion which has been ongoing to a certain extent, but I think it has intensified. And in that respect, thank you so much to all the panelists. And we will definitely take note of your valuable input and hope to later on club it all in a publication and come up with some good policy solutions that will help us give some recommendations to policymakers all over South Asia, because I think this is a problem and a challenge that we all share, and where also cooperation is a very pertinent issue, despite, let's say, political dissonances which we have in the region. So all the best. Thank you for participating, and the floor is yours. Thanks to SDPI, and back to you, Emel.
Yes, thank you so much, Birgit. I think very perfectly we have set up the scene as well. So I think just taking lead from what you mentioned, energy security actually is very pivotal to the regional development, just like you mentioned, as it strongly links to with some very strong and key economic indicators that includes industrial growth, employment, even the livelihood opportunities as their infrastructure development, education, and health. So this is something, there's very strong indirect index between energy security and the other SDGs as well. But I think, at the same time, driven by a very constant increase in demand, as we're urbanizing and industrializing, the conventional sources of energy are apparently not enough to fuel this growth. Resultantly, many countries are procuring energy supplies in the global market for very fierce competition. And I think further, the reliance on imported energy sources have also created sort of this vulnerability against the supplies and price fluctuations. And just linking with another thing is that, on the other hand, this growing vulnerability against climate change of particularly the South Asian countries and the worsening environmental profiles due to the increased consumption of the fossil fuels. Not particularly for the industries, but we do have this cross country issues as well. And this exploration will also create a more binding constraint than even does the resource deficits. So, now if we see that, if you look at the South Asian perspective in this backdrop, some efforts have also been made to address the energy security concerns in the past years, which has actually led to an increase in global electricity excess cover from, the figure which I have from the IEA is 84% in 2010 to almost 91% in 2021. So that's over 1 billion people that have gained access between 2010 to 2021. But I think nonetheless, despite these advancements, the global efforts currently are not quite aligned with the objectives set by, when we talk about energy security, it's mainly the SDG 7 that actually aims to achieve the universal access to clean energy by 2030. Even as of today, almost 70 million individuals lack access to this electricity. When we again just linking it with the also again, just like you also pointed out, the need that constantly decreasing costs and we should call environmental friendly nature of the renewable energy resources that has actually gained a very global acceptance to address this challenge. SDG 7 also calls for a very increased share of renewable energy in total primary energy supply. So in the background of opportunities and challenges highlighted above, the energy security concerns of South Asia, it is very critical to analyze different RE solutions and develop a sort of a workable pathway for challenges persisting in the region. So I think we'll actually try to this discussion to come up with a sort of some policy recommendation matrix that can actually be forwarded to the relevant stakeholders, how we can actually have very strong intercollaboration between South Asia, as well as what lessons could be learned and how the policy gaps can actually be filled. So now, before we actually go towards the panel discussion, we do have a very technical presentation from the SAARC Energy. When we talk about the regional cooperation, particularly around this area, SAARC has to play a very significant role in addressing the energy access challenges. I'm sorry, I'm guessing it's back. Yeah. So, it's important to know that, while again, just like just recently, we have had the last webinar as well, in which we actually tried to highlight the role of SAARC, particularly for the case of Pakistan. SAARC has a very good potential to contribute to improving the energy access. So we're very fortunate to have been joined by Mr. Ehsan Javed, who's currently working as a research fellow of renewable energy at the SAARC Energy Center for his technical presentation. And Mr. Ehsan has also worked with the Ministry of Climate Change and NACON, now known as NECA. And he has a vast experience of working with the SAARC countries across the region. So with this, Ehsan, I'll be handing it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Ubaid, and thank you very much to SDPI and to Friedrich Naumann Foundation for inviting me on this event. So first of all, let me check out if I can share my screen. Okay.
Yes, if I could just request the MIS team to
Is my presentation visible?
not as of yet.
Is it okay now?
SSR, we cannot actually see it. It's not. It isn't being shared currently.
1 minute, let me check, share screen.
Yes, it's coming up now.
So, okay. So is it visible now?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay. So basically the topic energy security in South Asia and transition to sustainable sources. So I would just briefly touch on the South Asian region. Then I will briefly touch on the existing reserves of energy in this region, plus the potential of energy trade, plus and on the regional cooperation which was happening, is happening, and may be in future, could be enhanced in future. So this is the glimpse of the South Asian map where we are lying in the middle. So on the southern side, we have India, Nepal, Bhutan on the eastern side, and on the west side, we have Iran, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan. So basically, I'll just be very brief in about my organization. So it's an organization called SAARC Energy Centers, established in 2006. And it's a technical arm of the SAARC Secretariat, which is working in the energy sector, and it is being funded by all the member states of South Asia. The professional staff are hired from the member states, and the expert services are also outsourced through the external market. These are a few of the thematic areas whereby we are working. We are actually working on the energy and power trade and transport environment, energy efficiency, renewables, technology transfer, and rural electrification. The type of activities include policy-based research studies, knowledge-sharing events such as training workshops, webinars, video conferences, and finally on the pilots and special projects. So our all program activities are basically based on these thematic areas and are funded by the member states. So just to give an overview of the South Asian energy sector, we have a primary energy consumption pattern of each member state is widely different from other member states. About one very important aspect to note here is that quarter of the population in South Asia region does not have access to the electricity, while half South Asians are still dependent on traditional biomass for cooking and heating. So we always talk about the importance of electricity, but we should not look at the other domain, which is mostly covered through biomass, which is very unhealthy, which is traditional biomass, has lots of pollution issues and lots of health issues on the population of South Asia, which is also a very alarming indicator to me that still half the population of South Asians are relying on that traditional biomass. On the Indian side, India is basically heavily dependent on coal. Bangladesh and Pakistan are heavily reliant on gas for their primary energy consumption. Bhutan and Nepal, our neighbors, are reliant on the hydro-based energy. Afghanistan and Sri Lanka have major shares of coal and oil. This is just a trend on all these member states. So we did a study back in 2018, whereby we actually tried to find out what will be the increase of primary energy consumption in all these member states by 2023 or maybe till 2030. And we found out one indicator was very same for all the member states, that they need energy in future. Energy demand will be increased for all the member states, including Pakistan, Nepal, India, because all are developing countries. So even Nepal and Bhutan, smaller countries like Nepal and Bhutan, are trying to go for industrialization in future. So they would definitely require energy. Next is on the reserve side. So when we talk about energy requirements, so then we also talk about whether does this region have enough energy reserves to feed the population of this region, or do they always have to rely on energy imports? So on the coal side, we see that there's a huge potential of recoverable resource such as 133 billion tons. Natural gas is 85 trillion cubic feet of recoverable resources. Oil is 816 million tons. Hydro has huge potential in Pakistan, Nepal, India, and Bhutan of 296 gigawatts, which is the technically feasible potential. Renewable potential, we all know it's just a number 744, although I'm pretty sure that that number is huge, can be increased hugely. So there is lots of potential of wind and solar in South Asia region. So reserves are available, resources are available. We need to tap on these resources. So what is the potential? The potential is that we have been kept on talking about if the Bhutan, Nepal areas have huge hydropower potential, they could be able to trade electricity with Bangladesh, with India, and maybe to the Myanmar. We have already talked about and produced a feasibility study on a project of 10,000 megawatt in Nepal, whereby the electricity from Nepal could be transported to India and onwards to Pakistan. There's a huge potential. There is a very big study conducted on that one. Similarly, on the western side of Pakistan, Pakistan could also get cheap electricity from Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan hydropower resources transported through Afghanistan to Pakistan. Iran has huge potential. Pakistan is already trading electricity with Iran. Iran is giving electricity to Pakistan. So this whole region has huge potential of trading electricity and energy sector things with each other, oil and gas too. On the power outlook side, what we have observed in one of our studies conducted in 2020 that all the member states demand and supply have a huge difference in 2024, and it will be more in 2030. And what the picture shows that Bhutan and Nepal are expected to be in surplus position, whereby India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka will become hardly self-sufficient, while Afghanistan and Afghanistan and Bangladesh will face deficits. So this is a picture based on the existing policies of all the member states, on the GDP growth of the member states, on the current scenarios. This power outlook was established on that one. So we assume that there is huge potential to trade electricity with maybe from Bhutan or maybe from Nepal to feed electricity to the neighboring countries of India and Pakistan. Then on the petrol and diesel scenarios of 2030, we have found out that apart from India, all the other member states will have deficit in their petrol and diesel supply in comparison to their huge demand in 2030. So India is the only country whereby we are seeing that it would have a surplus amount of petrol and oil in 2030 because of the huge investment on their oil refineries, whereby they are importing crude oil from abroad and refining it into their refineries, and then those refined petrol can be provided to the neighboring countries on a cheaper cost compared to whatever countries are importing to abroad. So this gives a glimpse on the petrol and diesel side, on which a huge potential is available for energy trade. Then this is a very interesting slide. Normally we talk about power electricity trade, but people do not have an idea on the potential. Like for example, this is in monthly electricity load profile of between India, Bhutan, and Nepal. And what it shows is that, for example, in month of July, India requires huge amount of electricity because it's a summer season in India. On the other hand, in month of June and July, Nepal and Bhutan are colder regions. They don't want electricity at those times. So basically that excess electricity which is produced by those hydropower plants in Nepal and Bhutan could be exported to India and Pakistan in those months, whereby electricity requirement is high in those areas. Similarly, it's vice versa. In months of November and December, when thermal power plants are lying vacant in India and Pakistan and maybe in Sri Lanka, so those could be able to transport back that electricity to Bhutan and Nepal, whereby hydropower electricity is reducing in those months, in months of winter, and they require huge amount of electricity for heating their homes in those months. So it's a win-win situation for all the countries, if we see the load profile of these countries. Okay, so next. So finally, I'll just give one or two slides. I've already talked about the reserve on the potential and the trade going on. So what we see in the member states is that all the member states are basically going for a clean, renewables, electric vehicles policies, and just wanted to give a glimpse of, like, for example, Bangladesh. It says that implementation of RE policies, RE projects, and increased use of less emission-based transport systems. So they are going for this policy. Similarly, Bhutan wants to explore the abundant hydropower resources in their country. India wants to decarbonize energy to 50% and achieve 500 gigawatts of fossil fuel by 2030. Similarly, Nepal and Bhutan have similar type of a policy. Pakistan would like to shift to 60% RE, 30% electric vehicles, and completely ban imported coal by 2030. Sri Lanka wants to achieve 70% RE. So most of these member states are basically trying to go for clean energy, for clean environment, and for renewable energies and electric vehicles. And the basically the available resources are there to tap up those potential and to also go for energy trade with the neighboring countries. So energy priorities, these are just a few glimpses of the priorities whereby we as a SAARC Energy Center think that these member states should go for cleaner energy mix through renewable energies, electric vehicles, and maybe hydro energy too. Plus, shifting investment toward utility scale and decentralized systems have been installed in Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka for net metering billing. It has been hugely successful. So other member states could also follow the route. Plus, those areas whereby electric grid are not available, we have seen in Pakistan that those community scale or microgrid projects have been hugely successful in northern areas of Pakistan. So that example could be explored and could be replicated in other member states, whereby those areas which are not connected to grid could be fed with the community scale projects. Plus newer technologies like offshore wind and battery storage systems. So there is work going on in India and Pakistan on that. Then another thing which was that coal, oil and gas reserves for their exploration, Pakistan and India are far ahead than other countries. So other countries could have some kind of an engagement with these countries and try to learn from their experience to tap up the potential of coal, oil, if there is any in their country. So that regional cooperation of this kind could be happen in future. Plus on the subsidy side in Pakistan, most of the South Asian countries have already removed subsidies from petrol and diesel, and the shift should go toward the electric vehicle side. Finally, green hydrogen is a promising area, and we feel that pilot projects should start. They have been kick-started in few of the member states, but only on the policy side. So real projects could go on in the future. So this is overall the energy landscape of South Asia, with the reserve, with the potential, and with the successful examples which we have already seen. The trade is happening between the neighboring countries of India, like India, Bhutan, India, Bangladesh. They are trading coal, they are trading oil, pipelines are already established, gas pipelines are available. So trade is already going on, electricity trade is going on. So our stance is that all the other South Asian countries should also collaborate with each other for trading electricity, energy sector commodities, and things like this. So thank you very much, Ubaid, again, and for Friedrich Naumann Foundation for inviting me, and I would be glad to answer any question and take part in the next session. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much, Hassan Saab. Extremely insightful and highlighting all the figures. And yes, we'll definitely be coming with you some questions. So I think one of the perspective I've actually gained from that is that South Asia, particularly the SAARC region, is actually has a very rich renewable energy potential that actually provides us some ample opportunities for extraction of this potential through a mutual collaboration. But despite that, I mean, you also highlighted that the interregional trade in this region is perhaps below the potential that we actually have. But the significant areas of potential exist, such as, I mean, solution-oriented trainings and research, refinement of different policies, and implementation of joint these different projects, and piloting the different projects, and I mean, sort of compiling the knowledge and best practices that actually exist. So again, I think also thank you for highlighting all the figures around the demand side. I mean, that also provides very clear opportunity when how this whole trading process can actually work. Thus, so I mean, to accelerate this, I think much is needed to be achieved through the regional cooperation. And yes, especially I mean, the key recommendations that you mentioned around the renewable energy share, the use of decentralized renewable energy solution, I mean, accelerating the technology deployments such as the offshore wind and the battery systems, developing different pilot projects. So I think yes, we have seen actually some very solid recommendations on this side as well. So now, thank you so much, Hassan Saab, and we'll definitely be coming to you with some further questions as the discussion goes on. Now, with this, I think we'll be actually moving towards panel discussion where we're being joined by some extreme energy experts who will be highlighting also the South Asian context, but also what the country-specific context indicates and how that can actually be further established. But before we actually move towards the country presentation, let me just introduce the panel. We have been joined by Mr. Asad Mahmood, who has been working in the South Asia region, and he's basically an energy efficiency and renewable energy expert, and Asad Saab has done some a lot of work around the whole South Asian perspective, ranging from the decentralized solutions to the overall big projects. We have been joined by Mr. Nitaya, who is an energy environmental analyst and Center for Research on Energy in Clean Air, Kriya, India. We have been joined by Mr. Abhishek Mala, who is an energy specialist at International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, ICMO, based in Nepal. We've also been joined by Ms. Harshi, who is an Energy Environment Officer at Center for Environmental Justice, Sri Lanka. And lastly, and last but not the least, we have also been joined by Dr. Khalid Walid, who is currently the research fellow, as well as the lead researcher at Energy Unit of STPI. So once again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I think we'll actually start with a bit of overall South Asian perspective, and then we'll delve into each country. So if I could actually request Sir Mahmood Saab, you have been working around most of these regions. So, I mean, how do you actually see the regional cooperation actually playing its important role in addressing the energy security concerns, or how decentralized energy solutions can actually address that question? So with this, over to you, Asif Saab. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me, and shall be looking forward to the speakers and very good bird eye view given by Mr. Hassan. So like what I mostly say from South Asian perspective is like the only thing more unpredictable than the weather is a power supply. So you never know when the lights will go out overall when we take South Asia as a whole and look into these things. But nevertheless, like again, like looking into another perspective is like what is common between the South Asian countries is like in South Asia, when people start measuring the length of power cuts in hours instead of minutes, it's like a blackout marathon. So this is another common thing which we mostly like are quite well versed, the people of this region as well. And now coming to this clean transition, and which ultimately leads towards energy security of the region, is like when we talk about transition to sustainable energy sources in South Asia, it's just like you're convincing a stubborn teenager to eat their vegetables. It takes time, patience, and maybe a few incentives. So we have seen like the countries giving so many incentives to their different set of stakeholders to promulgate and penetrate the latest technology solutions, and on the basis of scientific and logical reasoning, they are looking into all these things. So looked into with an optimistic perspective, because ultimately it's going to be a sort of benefit for all the regional countries in terms of knowledge exchange and in terms of technology transfer and technology you can say upgradations, where so there is a race, you can say, like in terms of when we talk about again energy security in South Asia, we can say like it's just like a game of musical chairs. Everyone wants seat at the energy table, but there are never enough chairs to go around. So we definitely have less supply side, and everyone is like looking towards having more and more share because of their economic requirements. They need to push their GDPs. So even though the scenarios which Mr. Hassan has just displayed, I think like so we might be going beyond that if if the countries keep progressing at a very you can say very fast pace. So nevertheless, like the common problem in all the countries which we see is like definitely the energy guzzlers in terms of power generation mix and the old inefficient plants. Some have their heat rates efficiency levels fixed, and so that is something like which is good to just keep the cost down, electricity cost down. I've seen some questions as well in the chat box. I think we'll respond to those at the end, but they were quite like one of the questions was like I'd just like to respond during my talk as well, was basically who is responsible for, like in Pakistan perspective, if we are talking about like who is more influential, the government side or the groups with the vested interests because of whom the power prices are not going down. So it's ultimately like institutions have to play their role, as we can see the best examples in the region where the regulator has an upper hand and they have right technical manpower which can really convince all the stakeholders. So my point is like the departments, and we should learn from the South Asian perspective, which the departments have done. There are certain departments which are very good. Almost all the departments are good in technical resource, and ultimate thing what we need to do is like the convincing power which the technical people should have in the regional countries to go for this interconnectivity, as well as we are thinking about our individual countries perspective. So the regional security perspective should also be kept in mind whenever we want to go towards immediate transition towards sustainable energy resources. And I'd like to conclude my this segment, the transition to sustainable energy sources in South Asia is like trying to teach an old power plant new tricks. It's a slow process, but we are getting there eventually. So ultimately, we need to move forward with optimistic perspective and think of the economic perspective of a region as a whole. So this is the only way to excel and move forward.
Yes, thank you so much, Asad. I think very, very relevant, and I can also see some common grounds coming with the interventions we actually had from yourself and as well as Javed Saab as well. So I think what I got from here is that there's more needs to happen across the power supply side as well, and we need to have integration of the efforts and look at the economics as well as the environmental safeguards. So I think just one key point from mine before I actually move to Sunil. Yes, that perhaps Asad Saab or Asad Saab, we can actually sort of, one recommendation that can actually go from here is that perhaps we can just create sort of this facilitation desk from some online platform of South Asian countries that can actually connect the different project developers, investors, service providers. Also was reading something similar from one of the SARC reports that Asad Saab mentioned and other stakeholders of the region. So the platform can actually support the RD deployment by supporting the investors and securing the finance more efficiently. And I think secondly, Asad Saab, the point that you mentioned, I think from also taking lead from what the question that was mentioned within in the Zoom as well. There is a need to address the political challenges to foster cross-boundary trade agreements to enable the exchange of clean energy technologies between the different countries. So I think, yes, very relevant points. We'll be actually going into further depth around those as well. But I think let's just move towards the panelists. Initially, I would actually request Mr. Sunil Dahiya from KREA. So, to sort of present a case of India and how we can actually address the energy security concerns through renewable energy solutions. And secondly, Sunil Saab would also request you if you can also shed some light on how cross-border cooperation and renewable energy can expedite the energy transition for energy-pressed countries in the South Asia. So with this, over to you, Sunil Saab. Yes, you can already share this. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thanks, Subed, and thank you SDPI for inviting me and us for this discussion. It's very heartening to see that after a long time, the South Asian countries, the researchers, and the research organizations at least are now coming together to understand the common issue which we all have been facing, be it the energy security or air pollution. This year has been really promising, and I'm really happy that there are such conversations which have already started. So I'll take about 5 minutes. I have a couple of slides in terms of presenting a case how renewable energy is establishing or helping India establish its own energy security in a more efficient way. And obviously there have been roadblocks. I'll also talk about that. So just a sec, how do I? Yeah. So before I start on the energy demand and security perspective and renewables role in that, before that, as it's been mentioned by the previous speakers, that South Asia as a geography is highly dependent on fossil fuels of different kinds. And that is very evident from this graph, which has been taken from a platform which we at KRIA maintain. What it does is it looks at the satellite retrievals of nitrogen oxide, which is a direct indicator of either the petroleum products being consumed in the transport sector or industries in the cities or city peripheries, or coal-based power generation, as you would see in it's visible in most parts of India where there are coal clusters. The black dots on the left side present depicts the power generation facilities based on coal, oil, and gas. And on the right side, you will see that it's the same geographies which have very high nitrogen oxide concentrations. And we know coal and oil both emit sulfur dioxide as well. So if we see SO2 map, that will also look very similar. And both these pollutants are precursor to PM 2.5, which is known as a deadly particle. And we know that South Asia is the most vulnerable geography in today's times to air pollution, and most of the population which lives in the region is breathing hazardous pollution levels. So there is a very, very close link between how we generate electricity today and the health impacts or the health burden faced by the region, which ultimately results into economic damages due to hospital bills or health bills, as well as lost welfare cost. So moving on to how renewable energy growth and how is happening in India particularly, and what are the implications for other energy sources or electricity sources. So if you look at today's installed capacity in India, out of 423 gigawatt, about 130 comes from solar, wind, and other renewable energy sources. Now, there are like in multiple national as well as international communications, not just India, but most of the countries have also started including hydro as renewable energy sources, and that's a bit of confusing aspect of what renewable energy is, because hydro is a conventional source of energy, as most of the countries have been generating this energy for a long time, and it has its own implications. But to say that about 30% of electricity right now comes from renewable energy sources in terms of installed electricity capacity in India. Now, when we say that 30% or XYZ% of installed electric capacity is from renewable energy sources, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will be generating that amount of electricity, because the capacity utilization factors or the hours available for generation of a particular kind of energy, be it solar or wind, varies, and they are not, these energy sources are not available at the same level all around the day. Instead of or compared to coal, where or even hydro for that matter, where we can control how much do we generate at what time. So that's why there is intermittency in these sources. So when it comes to generation, India right now is generating about 11.5% of its electricity from renewable energy sources. And what does that mean? It has grown from very low numbers, and even if we compare 2018, it was at about 8% and has grown to 11%. That's a significant contribution from renewable energy. And what does that mean is that during the first 6 months of 2023, we have at least avoided 6 million ton of extra coal consumption by additional RE coming in compared to first 6 months of last year. And in total, about 60 to 70 million ton of coal has been avoided just within first 6 months of 2023, which means that more and more growth in electricity demand is now being fulfilled by the growing renewable energy sources. While I say that, as earlier speakers also spoke about, that coal still plays a major role in India's electricity generation, and we see about 70 to 75% of India's electricity even till today is coming from coal. And that also means that the most of or the bigger portion of the growth in electricity demand is still being fulfilled by coal, which is about 90% of the incremental growth every year. It's still coming from coal, at least for last year. So that again says that even though we have increasing installed renewable energy capacity, installed generation from renewable energy sources, but the time when RE takes over coal in terms of meeting the growth in demand, which will mean that coal peaks and start declining after that, it's still to come. We hope and we understand that if you look at the growth projections for renewable energy in India, we aspire to have from 423 today, we aspire to have 777 gigawatt of total installed electricity capacity by 23. And if you use the capacity utilization factors as of today, or present capacity utilization factors, provided we install renewable energy in a systematic manner from now till 2030, and like that's the assumption. We need to install the committed renewable energy every year. And if we are able to do so, our calculations at CREA shows that by 2027, we will achieve peak coal consumption for electricity generation sector, and the coal consumption for electricity generation will start declining after that, which would only be possible if we are able to install about 500 gigawatt of non-fossil energy, which includes nearly 300 gigawatt of solar, 100 gigawatt of wind, and about 14 of biomass. Now, there is an interesting case of how this increasing RE capacity is ensuring that India manages its electric demand, and that comes from the load curve, demand load curves. So if you look at the hourly demand of electricity in India, we see that the peak demand during, like, it varies based on month to month, but for this year, March, and even right now, it's true for most of the states in India, that the peak demand is occurring around the afternoon. And that is the time when the solar is at its peak in terms of generation. And the right side graph shows that the coal-based or thermal energy, which comes from coal and lignite, mostly stays consistent all throughout the day, dips slightly when there is higher RE generation. But whenever there is a peak during the day, that's been mostly met by solar during the afternoon hours, and in the early morning hours and late evening hours, the hydro takes over and try to meet that demand, meaning that the generation from coal remains more or less at consistent levels, and there is a ramping up and ramping down of coal-based power plants, which can be managed. The graph below is from Karnataka, a state in southern India, which has been doing fabulous in terms of renewable energy installations. And we see that this is for yesterday. The wind and solar electricity was able to meet 40% of the peak demand during the day, which is a very, very high number for any state in India. Usually it's around 20% for all over the country, but few states as Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat have higher share of electricity. So it ensures that India doesn't have to burn more coal when there is higher peak demands, and it can be met through renewable energy. Now, obviously, there are two pathways, one going the centralized solar or RE generation and the decentralized solar generation. There is a higher and more efficient case to be made for decentralized or distributed renewable energy because of multiple factors. One is that most of the South Asian regions still have very high transmission and distribution losses. Even India stands at around 15 to 16%. Which means that if we are consuming 100 units of electricity, we somewhere it has to be about 116 units have to be generated for that, and those 16 units are lost in the transmission. So if we generate this electricity through this distributed renewable energy grids, rooftop solars, then that distribution loss can be minimized. Second, now at least in India and as well in other countries, there is EV penetration which is coming very fast, which means that the demand in the cities where most of the transportation demand is will grow, and to meet that demand, if the electricity is generated at the load center, that will ultimately mean that there is no extra burden on the grid to be able to either supply that electricity or generate that electricity. What it will also ultimately lead to, and that's already happening in India, and we are moving on that pathway. It's been happening across Europe and US for a long time, that we'll have a time of the day tariff. So usually because of the heats, we have a day peak, but the heat stays all throughout the day. And even though there is a reduced demand, but there is a demand, higher demand in the night during certain seasons. And that might mean that when solar is not available, there will still be slightly higher demand. And to manage that demand, what's happening is India is coming up with time of the day tariff, which means that some of the activities which you eventually do during the night time, which is washing clothes or many other things, can be shifted to the solar hours, where you will pay a little less compared to the evening tariff of the electricity. And that's why the nighttime peak demand can be reduced and shifted to the daytime. Secondly, the last point there is that there are still lots of remote villages in the forest areas, in the hilly terrains, and ensuring that the grid reaches this point, these villages, is very expensive affair. And to manage that, maybe most cost-effective way to ensure energy security for these regions is through decentralized renewable energy. I'll take one more minute. So there is a debate about that coal is cheaply available in this region, and that's why we should use that. And renewable energy is intermittent, it's expensive. So I had a couple of points on that. So coal's cost, we have seen over the last 2 decades, even in India, which has abundance of coal resources, has been increasing over time, the fuel cost, which leads to increase in the cost of electricity, whereas renewable energy costs are coming down with more and more scale size generation plants coming up, or whenever the capacity is growing, the cost reduces for renewable energy. It might not reduce further, but it will never grow the way it's growing for coal. That's why having a cheap, affordable energy source can only be ensured through renewable energy. There are increasing local conflicts around commons like air, water, and land, which ultimately leads to delay in establishment of coal-based power plants, which leads to cost overruns. And at times, with that, there are few power plants in India which were initially supposed to be constructed at maybe 8,000 crores INR, and now because of the cost overrun and delay, they are costing about 20,000 crores. So the cost of the project increases by 2 times, which ultimately lead to increasing cost of electricity generation. We have also seen that even India, which has abundance of coal resources, is dependent on coal imports, and at times when the import prices are very high, we can't afford importing that coal, which leads to slight imbalances in the energy demand and supply side. We also know that increasing regulations around air pollution reduction in terms of FGD installations, DeNOx installations, and other things are becoming more and more strict in the geography, and they will lead to increasing cost of power generation for the fossil fuel-based power plants. And similar things will happen or are happening when we are announcing net zeros, emission caps. There will be a cost attached to carbon emissions and fossil fuel consumption, which will ultimately increase the cost of fossil fuel-based generation. And that's why renewable energy is the only way forward if the region has to ensure energy security at affordable prices for its citizens. This is a case for India, but it holds almost true for all other geographies in the region. Yeah, thank you. I'll maybe later on I'll speak a little bit about cross-border
Sure, definitely. Thank you so much, Assam. This was wonderful highlights, and good to see that RE has started to replace fossil fuel demand in consumption in India. And I think because I definitely agree that if an RE transition has to actually take place on a large scales, then the RE actually has to, apart from the just new additions of RE, actually RE also has to replace the existing coal-fired power plants as well. And I think in that case, one area that might also play a very important role in the South Asia is to come up with different, perhaps financing mechanisms, how that can actually help, phase out or perhaps go towards the early retirement of coal power plants as well. So, and also thank you for highlighting how RE is actually managing the peak load demand as well. And but I think just before actually coming towards Abhishek Mala Saab, let me just the key point, one very important point that you actually mentioned was on the rural electrification side, because when we actually see that the progress observed in increasing electricity access of the past year, very major challenge is that the reliability and availability of clean energy in the rural communities, that is still a major challenge that is actually hindering the growth. Rural communities or the impoverished segment or energy deprived countries. So just like I think Birgit highlighted, Essence have highlighted, and the rest of the speakers, there's a very strong relation between access to clean energy and even also adaptation to the climate change. That is, energy access definitely contribute very closely to the discharges after preparedness, climate smart agriculture that can also help farmers improve preservation and those sides as well. So I think we have been joined by Mr. Abhishek Mala. He's an energy specialist at ICMOD, and I think ICMOD has done a lot of work in all of these countries, Abhishek, and a lot has actually been done, particularly for the working with the communities in each of these regions around different renewable energy-based solutions. So I think perhaps a major question from you is that, in your perspective, how can the affordability of distributed renewable energy be ensured for the impoverished segments across, the HKH region particularly, and also if you could also touch upon what perhaps positive gender impacts can be delivered through this. So thank you again so much, Abhishek Saab, for joining us today. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ubaid, and also my good afternoon here from Kathmandu to all the seasoned panelists. Yeah, I think that's a very good question, Ubaid, on the decentralized renewable energy, and everybody is sort of trying to figure out how to make it affordable. That has been very, one of the key questions to many governments, development agency, bilaterals, and others. So when we say distributed renewable energy, we really need to understand that there are multiple forms of that. And when I say that, is mostly concentrated to, like the services that the distributed renewable energy system is providing. So it might be rural electrification, or it might be productive end use systems like irrigation, or, processing, or cold storage, or thermal systems, heating. So first, I think we have to take a step back and really try to understand, like in this area of distributed renewable energy systems, what are the systems that is serving as more a socio-economical sort of cause? What can serve potentially like for commercial purpose and other? So that demarcation is really important for us to understand when we are talking about affordability and financing or commercialization of this kind of systems. So let's say for an instance of rural electrification. Now these projects are often in a very remote locations. The affordability of the community would be generally very low, and the capital cost of this kind of systems, because it includes the generation component as well as the distribution. And given it's remotely located, the transportation is also going to be very heavy. So the cost of generation is obviously going to be much higher than the utility side of electricity. So always there will be a viability gap for affordability for this kind of system. So this kind of system needs to be looked from a socioeconomic perspective. But saying that, we also need to understand how can we increase the utilization of this kind of systems so that there is an operational and sustainable viability. So there is some kind of revenue generated for the increasing the consumption of the system. So when these systems are really designed, I think it's really important for us to look it from really holistic perspective, not just saying that there are 50 households and we would, put in maybe 200 watts per households and it'll be like a 10 kilowatt system or something like that. But we really need to look at what are the other enabling environments in those particular locations that would contribute towards the success of this intervention. So say, for instance, if the area is connected to some road, if there is a near market center, if there are some financial services available in that area, if there is some kind of skills or, other kind of things, which is really important to understand, because that understanding will help us to really say, what kind of system we need to design and put into the place, and whether there will be, economic opportunities in future to really utilize the system so that the services can, get linked, and, there is, a revenue generated through the system. So that is one example. But as I said earlier, it's really important to have that demarcation of how you want to treat the affordability and sustainability of the system. Are you really looking from a pure commercial financial sense, or you're looking more economical or social side? The other examples could be, say, for instance, in irrigation systems, or cold storage systems or other systems where, again, the same principle applies. So say you have two sites to irrigate, and if you do not understand the characterization of the site, say, for instance, like what kind of crops you can competitively grow there, do you have a market absorption, or that infrastructure to link it to the market, or have those financial services and partnerships to really take those end produce to convert them to cash. Let's say there is one place where there is no road connectivity, has excellent crop production and everything. Say one place that has road connectivity, market, and excellent crop production. When you go and put two irrigation systems in these sites, I mean, the design is going to be completely different, because one side you'd put an irrigation system with a potential to cover larger areas, so that because there is a market that can address the produce. The place where you do not have infrastructure, you will go for much more smaller size to just cater the domestic consumption. So the investment in the systems is going to be very, very different. And, that will serve as a starting benchmark point to really think about, how the system can be made more affordable, because just giving the water is not, enough. I mean, that water needs to convert to cash when you sell the crops. So all that linkages has to be, really, really well investigated and identified whenever we are designing the system to ensure the system would have sustainability and affordability. So what I want to say in a nutshell is it's really important to have this holistic approach when we are, designing any kind of distributed renewable energy project. And we have to see it from the service end, not just look from the technology side. And we have to look at all those enabling parameters that would contribute to the success of the project, because the technology in isolation will not be able to, generate success on its own. So once we identify all of this, it will be very clear to us on how we need to projects, what are the gaps we need to fill through a financial instrument, or through capacity, or through policy or regulations, or, so on, or engaging multi-stakeholders, like who needs to be engaged here. So if we get all of those kind of, overview, then I'm pretty much sure that there will be, this kind of questions would be answered to a certain extent. So we will know how we can run this project. So the next question on gender impact with GRE, I think Given, in the rural areas, we are having a lot of migration in the HKH region. So people are moving out, they're going abroad for jobs, and the women are left behind. And we really need to start thinking about, promoting this gender-friendly technologies. Let's say, for instance, for irrigation, diesel pumps has been used, and just to crank one diesel pump would probably need like two really strong people to turn it on. If you put in a solar pump, it's just a flick of a switch, you start getting water. Similarly, there are so many other processing technologies, even like drinking water system. The women and children have to fetch, walk like several kilometers to fetch water. If you can bring those there, I mean, that creates a lot of, opportunity for them to, focus on other stuff and productively use their saved time to do other stuff. So there are plenty of opportunities that we see, and EasyMode, we have a commitment that any project that we do, gender GESI is our focus. And we have, executed a lot of projects that are, implemented in this fashion. So I see a very, very important role, especially in our context in HKH, where, it's geographically is quite challenged. And, the context of migration is also quite high. And, the climate change is also quite rapid because we have elevated temperature change in the mountains. So we experience faster climate change than the other parts of the world. And even for mitigation as well as for adaptation, distributed energy will play a major role. And, given the vulnerability is high on gender, we see that there is a clear, important role of renewable energy on this front. So by saying that, I would like to end my my talk here, and we'll probably take questions, but unfortunately I have to leave for another meeting, and I'm more than happy to answer those offline. Thank you.
Yes, sure, definitely. Thank you so much, Abhishek Saab. I think just starting from the last point you mentioned, it's really good to see that the EasyMode is actually promoting the gender supportive policies. And I think, the key point here when we actually talk about the rural electrification, how we can actually support them through RE, the community engagement perspective that you mentioned is extremely, I think, very critical. We have observed that in Pakistan, that any community-based models, such as the ones actually implemented by Al Khan Rural Support Programs or a Rural Support Program. Peters did some very good work around that. But the community-based models that have actually come out to be very strongly successful. There are a lot of success stories mentioned around that. And I think when we actually look at all these things from a regional or South Asian perspective, then there is very potential of actually, these understanding the best practices or replicating the model existing in the neighboring countries. So that's actually something that's also very relevant. And definitely, I completely agree with the point. The same things from the service ends would actually make for a far much better case in this world. So thank you so much, Abhishek sir. We have actually received some of the questions we will definitely be sending to you over the email as well to respond, and will be actually coming to all the participants. But I think before that, we do have some interventions coming from Sri Lanka and Pakistan. So I think initially I would actually request our speaker from Sri Lanka, Ms. Harshi, who's also an energy and environment officer, to present sort of a case for Sri Lanka and also explain how she thinks that this regional, sort of also how regional cooperation between South Asian countries from this new perspective can actually be very supportive. So yes, thank you so much, Harshi, for joining us today. And with this, over to you. And if I could also request the MIS team to allow her to share the screen. Thank you.
I think can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah, thank you. First, I thank you for the inviting me for the interview. Please give you a few seconds. I will share my presentation. I'm Harshana Devardhana from Center for Environmental Justice from Sri Lanka. Now I'm going to explain energy scenario and policy issues related to Sri Lanka and any other things transition to renewable energy with regional cooperation. And Sri Lanka is a small island, you know about that. It's about total land area is more than 5,000 and population is approximately 22.2. In Sri Lanka is a middle income countries and according to them, Sri Lanka has been recording one of the lowest per capita carbon emission, right? Sri Lanka uses biomass, solar, wind, hydro, coal, and refined petroleum oil as the energy sources. In petroleum, Sri Lanka's importance to petroleum. This is mainly this petroleum used for the transport, power and power generation and industry. But a small amount is used for the domestic sector in limited to kerosene and LPG. In Sri Lanka, coal power productions and the usage increases during the in 2017. Coal provided 35% electricity requirement, and in 2019, coal provided 40.1% for the electric requirement. This in manufacturing industries, coal used in clinker and boilers is few usage. In Sri Lanka, biomass used for the cooking, mainly cooking purpose, and industry purpose they use the thermal energy. But in Sri Lanka, biomass not used to the electricity generation. In hydropower, Sri Lanka has a major hydro farm and 1,370 megawatt generated from large hydro and 20.5 megawatt produced by small hydro. In solar, Sri Lanka has the potential for the solar because Sri Lanka is lies within the equitable belt. In Sri Lanka has the potential for 6,000 megawatts. But in Sri Lanka, so far not initiated much more than. In Sri Lanka has the potential for the wind power plant 5,600 megawatt, but only 231 megawatt has been installed so far. In Sri Lanka, has the energy access with according to the 2016 data, which approximately 98.7% of total population had access to the electricity generation. In this graph shows that this energy accessible in Sri Lanka is a different area. This is the primary energy balance of the country. This pie chart shows that major energy production coming from the petroleum products and biomass products. It accounts for the 77%. Coal, hydro, and other renewable energy account for the 23%. In Sri Lanka, this transport sector use only the petroleum, and other industry and household commercial sector use the biomass, petroleum, electricity, and coal. This is the Sri Lanka has the most policies, action plans, and most of the things. But in Sri Lanka, the national policy aim to ensure energy security through the supplies that cleaner, secure, and economical and reliable. In addition, this contribute to the reduce Sri Lanka's dependence on fossil fuel to below 50% from the primary energy supply. In Sri Lanka, introduce and draft the plan for the energy sector development plan is 2015 to 2055. This is aimed to guideline the nation in all its efforts to become an energy self-sufficient nation by achieving the full potential renewable and other indigenous energy resources. In Sri Lanka, Science Paris Agreement and they have signed and they have updated the national determined contribution in 2021. They have, according to Sri Lanka, aims to achieve 70% renewable energy in electricity generation by 2030, to achieve the carbon neutrality by 2050 in electricity generation, and the thing is not to add to the capacities of power plants. In Sri Lanka, this draft Net Zero 2050 plan. In this plan, according to this plan, Sri Lanka plans to the proposed 1,060 megawatt nuclear plant power project and now expected to addition major and mini hydro power plant. And other thing is promote the biomass for the industry sector. But in Sri Lanka, we have found that this net zero plan drafted using the raw forest data, and they justify the carbon absorption by using this raw forest data, and they have prepared this without public consultation. According to this, we have suggested that this net zero 2050 plan is not reliable and not successful plan because they have many issues in this plan. In Sri Lanka, we have started the Battle for Solar Energy program for introduce solar power generation. But Sri Lanka has many solar power potential generation. But in Sri Lanka, by 2019, only they have generated 284 megawatt rooftop solar PV system. But Sri Lanka not use any other potential for this. They are energy power generation. And another thing is Sri Lanka does not have policy on electric vehicle importation, but they have talked about that and not the best way and best action for that to develop this method. In another thing, in Sri Lanka, newly concept is the just transition concept, and they have tried to achieve 7% renewable energy. They have promoting off-grid other than grid energy and promote the energy sources and promote community energy. And with the less environmental and social impact, and other things have focused to access the to all for the affordable price this energy source. And the other thing, Sri Lanka has challenged many challenges in the sector. This picture shows that this energy challenges. I only mentioned that the main issues. First one is the over dependence on fossil fuel energy production, and as example, the oil and coal account for 50% of total electricity production capacity. And other thing, this coal and fossil fuels imported by the other country, they have depend on that, and this imported fossil fuels constitute 25% of the total export expenditure. According to this, Sri Lanka has currently and the previous month we have faced the foreign currency shortage, and then have to face that can't import essential things, and including the coal and other petroleum. Then we have the Sri Lankan people have faced the fuel shortage and the power cut, scheduled power cut, and some essential service breakdown. Then government has introduced proposed to the work from home, and some services breakdown and stop that these things and something. Another thing, Sri Lanka proposed some coal power plant in this 2021 in the Sri Lankan eastern area. But Sri Lanka, according to the NDC and policy plan, they have said that to no added coal power plant in future. But they have proposed in some private companies they propose. And another thing is the some Sri Lanka use the renewable power plant, but they propose this power plant without addressing the environment and community effect. In example is in Sri Lanka is wind power plant is established, but they have not focused the birds and bats. They have leading to death and injury because they have this birds and bird coming to the near to this solar power plant. They have hit and they injured. Then, according to CAJ, we have talked with the ADB because the ADB funded that project and talk to the address these environment issues and introduce with this power plant with the radar system. Then bird come into near this radar cam system to observe and auto shut down. Then we have implemented now. Another thing is solar power plant established in Sri Lanka. They have mostly they focus forest area. In some example is in Sri Lanka Sibalandu area. This is proposed solar power plant in forest and forest shrubland. They have cut down forest and established to this solar power. But in Sri Lanka, we are addressed to this proposed and this issues and address. And another thing, during the field visit, we have observed in Valsapugala, Sri Lankan area, okay, destroyed forest land and established solar power plants in big area. In previously this area, there are the human-elephant conflicts and the drought. But I think after this, they have cut down this forest and destroyed, and they have already established this solar power plant. I think in the future, increase the human conflict, this drought increase, and some more issues come. According to the next, we have suggestions for this transition toward renewable energy with regional cooperation between South Asian countries. This is concept is based, and sometimes some countries have introduced or supporting the energy production, but they have effectively negative. Sometimes the environment. I think previously I have give the example. These are the renewable energy, solar and wind, but they supposed as with the environmental damage. In other things is two suggestions I have. We can, as the regional cooperation between South Asian countries, we can share the technologies, potential technologies of solar for wind power production, but without affecting energy sovereignty and the environmental and community. In other things, in Sri Lanka as well as other South Asian countries has potential for offshore wave power or some other wind or solar. But I think we need to improve the research and development to find the best power production method as a minimum harm to environment and community and indigenous. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hershey. Thank you for taking us through the journey through the whole energy scenario of Sri Lanka. And yes, completely agree with the points around the technology cooperation need. And it's good to see Sri Lanka coming up with a very strong policy support for the renewable energy sector. So I think we do have Dr. Khalid Waleed with us. Dr. Khalid, you have been listening to the recommendations coming from all the, all of the very distinguished speakers, and so, and a lot of, we can already see some really common grounds coming up on this point as well. So, Dr. Khalid, if I could also request that if you could also highlight from the context of Pakistan, how these regional partnerships, how that are extremely important in addressing the whole issue, and also along with different financing mechanisms that you're going to highlight. And Dr. Khalid, just request, we're expected to go 15 minutes beyond the time as well. We do have Dr. Hassan Albert coming after you for conclusion, and then I'll be proposing some of the recommendations coming from this webinar to Birgit as well. So Dr. Khalid, over to you. Thank you so much for joining us. We can see your slides over.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brad. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much, FNF, for inviting experts from the region. Well, I would be short. I'll try to make it brief. What IEA defines energy security, it defines it as a long-term phenomenon. It adds environmental needs, it adds economic development, and associated with energy security, so that we can counter for this vicious cycle of energy poverty, which is faced by all the countries in South Asia, one way or another. But we follow this vicious cycle where there is low productivity followed by low economic growth, low financing, and this circle continues. So we need to cater for that as well. This is the profile of Pakistan. Main source of energy coming from biofuel in terms of firewood. By 2030, we would cross 100 million tons of oil equivalent. So we need to cater for that, because this is highly dominated by either fossil fuel or either biofuel, which is hazardous for environment as well, and not economically feasible at the same time. This is the energy profile of India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Nepal. We can clearly see all these four countries, they are in their energy mix dominated with fossil fuel and biofuel. We need to cater that as well. As Sansab rightly mentioned, that we need to have this energy transition going on, and we can trade bilaterally, multilaterally, so that we can cater for this energy transition and finance or provide resources to other countries as well. I am an energy economist, so let's discuss different models of what is the economics behind this regional trade or energy cooperation. First is the gravity model of trade. It tells us that if the size of economy is sort of similar, you can trade. If distance is minimum, you can trade. If there is interdependence of energy, you can trade. If there is a need for energy transition and need for energy infrastructure to build, we can trade. So energy model of trade does support this cooperation. Another theory of comparative advantage. Some countries have resources, some countries have manufacturing and technologies. In South Asia, there is disparity. Some countries have resources in terms of hydel potential, and some countries have superior technology or manufacturing, or they have more capacity to build on things. So we can collaborate in that as well. Lastly is the HO model, which tells that there are some resource intensive countries and there are capital intensive countries and there are some labor intensive countries. So we need to have this introspection going on so that we can relate and we can mix up these factors of production in terms of energy and establish this holistic sort of energy markets in the region. This is a graph why we need energy transition and why we need cooperation in the region. On the x-axis, you would see there is a ratio of fossil fuel rent to the GDP. On y-axis, there is economic diversification. If you see Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, and India, they are in these blocks, Group 3 and Group 4, which means that they do not get benefit from fossil fuel exports because they do not have those kind of resources, and their level of economic diversification is very low, particularly Nepal, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. So these Group 3 and Group 4, they need more cooperation and they need energy transition. In this aspect, regional trade is also justified. So we need to have this as well. Another challenge that Essence have also mentioned, that this is the percentage of clean cooking fuels in Pakistan and India. If you see this graph, by 2012, the trend is same. Almost 40% of total population was using clean cooking fuel. But after 2012, something has happened in India, and it crossed Pakistan. This was the time where India declared 2016 as a LPG year, and they started to bring LPG supply, and their cooking profile started to change through stove investment and through cleaner and more efficient stoves. So these sort of cross-country learnings can support energy transition in countries where there is a lack of resources or lack of capacity building. So we can learn from other countries as well. This is the very gloomy picture of Pakistan, which tells us that Pakistan is not climbing up an energy ladder model. Primitive fuel share is increasing over the period of time, despite the fact that household income is rising due to accessibility and affordability constraints. This phenomena is very gloomy over the time. What we can do, what are different hurdles, or I would say elephants in the room in terms of regional cooperation? First of all is that there are hard borders, and then we need to understand the barriers in terms of regional power trade. We need to integrate what are different region to region or country to country context. Second is that there are tariff and non-tariff barriers in terms of trade, particularly if you talk about energy trade as well. Third is energy networks. They are either natural monopolies or they are under public ownership. Market liberalization is not there. Obviously, investment is required. Transaction costs are very high. Subsidies are being provided, a regulated market. Then there is lack of institutional mechanisms, lack of technology and institutional matches, weak political and technical leadership. Decisions are governed by political mandates and political leadership instead of technical opinion and technical advisories. There is environmental issues, and there is climate environmental issues, governance issues. Second most important is trust deficit among the countries, and then lastly, who would finance these initiative or energy cooperation. One very good thing going on in the world right now is that world is going towards more innovative sort of financing mechanism. For example, just energy transition partnerships or JETPs, they were introduced in COP26 Glasgow, in which G7 countries and their private sector they sort of finance through Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero GFANZ to the countries where there is a need for energy transition. So South Asia and other countries can join their hands to develop these sort of just energy transition partnerships and attract G7 countries and other funding agencies so that their energy sector can be transitioned towards cleaner fuels. What we can do, or my last concluding slide, is that we need to have this step-by-step methodology. First step is to introspect what sort of energy potential are there in South Asia, what is the regional context, what is country specific context, what are the resources at hand. Ehsan Saab has rightly pointed out and very detailed mentioned that what are the resources countries have, what are different historical practices, what is the level of local knowledge, and then we need to integrate through political will, regional integration, local integration, ministerial integration. Ministerial cooperation between countries is very important. Energy Ministry of Pakistan should talk to Energy Ministry of India. In that way, they would be talking experts with the experts, public-private integration. Another important thing is that we need to integrate the regional think tanks as well, just like this credit goes to STPI and FNF. That they have gathered this group of think tanks together. Then indigenize production processes should be indigenous. Manufacturing should be in the countries where there is comparative trade advantage. Then incentivize this trade, remove trade barriers, more dialogues. Carbon markets is a very emerging and very incentivization initiative in this regard. Regional markets, and lastly, political will. Implement through political will, regional governance. Civil society's role is very important. SAARC has a very phenomenal role to play in this. And lastly, monitoring and evaluation. I will conclude this as there is a common challenge or chaos going on in the region, that is climate chaos. We need to use this climate chaos as a ladder so that we can have this sustainability or sustainable energy cooperation going on in the region. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you so much, FNF, and thank you so much, STPI.
Yes, thank you so
Back
much.
to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Khalid. You really rightly pointed out, and you really made my job easier as well. So I think this has been a very, a lot of suggestions coming forward from your presentation, and I'll be highlighting some very common areas. But before that, I think I'll be going to Dr. Hassan Daud. But Dr. Hassan Daud, Dr. Hassan, you have been staying with us since listening to all the speakers from South Asian countries speaking on different perspectives. This is a topic that you also try to, push a lot from your end as well, that we need to have more strong collaborations between the government, between these countries. So, based on the discussion also, based on your experience, what do you suggest, what conclusions do you have from this consultation, and how do you think we can actually move forward with a strong collaboration within South Asia to address the, energy security challenges? So again, thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Hassan. Over to you.
Thank you, Ved and SDPI, and I see Bridget also. Good afternoon, all of you. I think while it is alarming on one account for us in the field of energy and also in the field of management, and even as a professor in university, I think the only good output or a good impact that I see from the overall scenario, and Dr. Khalid spoke about the chaos, is that the challenges are similar. So when the challenges are similar, I think a regional integrated approach for a sustainable and equitable energy transition amidst all these crises, amidst the soaring energy cost, and perhaps the socio-economic disbalance happening because of the energy resource availability is perhaps giving us a reason to react faster and on a path which is mutually agreed and perhaps acceptable to all in a way that it addresses the challenges which I think my colleague from India spoke about in terms of gender balance and also in terms of in terms of the socio-economic debate that we keep happening within our countries. So when Harshi was speaking, I think it was like if you just replace Sri Lanka and change the word Pakistan, I think all the challenges are similar. And I think some of the approaches that we could take through the support of what Ehsan Saab said, and perhaps I'm sure Bridget would also speak about this, is then we need to collaborate more. I think we cannot leave everything to politicians to decide, because the political conflicts and the political dilemma that our region is, despite the fact that the natural endowment that we enjoy, and I always been saying this, that if you do not use God's given resources, then you are taking a war with God. So therefore, if there are resources, indigenous sources in the form of water, in the form of great sunlight, in the form of great human resource, and if you do not use this, you are actually denying God's gifts to you. And in the same process, I think we need to have an approach which talks about, and I think Harshi spoke about just transition, and you also initially spoke, the just transition aspect is also vital. But again, remember, we should be careful what we wish for, it might come true also. So in that aspect, I think what we need to understand is to, again, sit together, have similar forums to reassess the challenges, because this is and there's an old Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. So we are living in interesting times. And in these times, I think people like us need to sit together, need to collaborate further, and perhaps look at global trends and perhaps economic situations. You go travel around the world and talk on similar subjects, you listen to online discussions that we have. I think the desire to have our latest sort of policy direction is also important, because these outdated policies are not working. And then you can't blame your predecessors for their mistakes, and because they were doing things based on their given scenario. So in our given scenario, based on how as organizations like SDPI are actually promoting, and Sunil spoke so well, it's just come up on screen. So for this, we also need to look at the marginalized and underprivileged group as our priority one, because we need to understand for affluent part of our society, they have several sources and access to energy. And the migration that perhaps Ehsan Saab spoke about because of climate change, and this migration may not be for good reasons of economic prosperity. It will be because of the challenges and poverty-led challenges that we have. Similarly, I think we need to work on legislations and policies to incentivize. And when I say incentivize, it is not, again, has to be a political jargon. It has to be well thought, informed decision making. And then therefore we need to, again, look at the entire segment of the society and perhaps the region where. So therefore, when you talk of certain initiatives like CARET, like SARC, and I wish SARC had done well, because you can write a book on how initiatives fail based on how we have performed in SARC. Because our performance has been not even not even in a scale of 1 to 10, not even at 1. So therefore, I think the opportunities in terms of challenges lies ahead of us. And in order to capitalize the indigenous sources, in order to provide access to energy, all as their fundamental rights, we need to work more, we need to talk more, and we need to shake the political decision makers across our region to help us make the just transition we all need so desperately. Let us work together, let us probably unite in our thought, and perhaps start a battle for a solar and renewable energy transition, which is our fundamental right. So I thank you all.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Hassan. I think you've done my job very well. That's again wonderful recommendations coming from, and completely agree with all the points, especially that the marginalized and the deprived regions needs to be at the center of our efforts there as well. So I think some very solid recommendations. I'll just maybe I'll highlight a couple of the key areas that have been commonly coming from all of these countries, and then I'll be handing it to you. So I think the regional cooperation fostering this is one of the very key pertinent points. I mean, there's a need to develop a regional cooperation mechanism with the representative of relevant ministries and departments of the government of the member countries. I think a couple of many of the speakers have highlighted this point. Secondly, I think the South members could also perhaps join and initiate a special capacity building programs or these specialized courses on operation of different community-based models and the programs, and that can actually be offered to the relevant stakeholders of all these organizations, and perhaps also developing an online platform of facilitation that's from the South Asian countries that can actually connect different developers, just like we talked about in the very first session. Then coming towards addressing the political challenges to foster this cross-boundary trade agreements to enable, I mean, the exchange of clean technologies. I think we have seen this coming from all of the participating countries. Secondly, I think there's a very strong need for scaling the what you call decentralized or off-grid solutions. I think Essence have also talked about that. We also saw that coming from Sri Lanka Indian perspective, as well as the colleague from Kathmandu, Nepal, ICIMO. So I mean, for that, we need to have some better monitoring and reporting for the finances. There is a need to design and implement environmental and social safeguards across a group of companies. Perhaps, just like you talked about, bringing community at the center, perhaps we can enable and adopt an area village growth approach to mitigate the risk of distributed generation and bringing the real return to the communities. And this is also where we actually have to promote the data collaboration and analytics to facilitate the research and integration of these technologies. Then I think we very rightly talked about addressing the social and gender challenges. I mean, to unlock the full potential of particularly the community-based solutions or RE solutions, there is a need to prioritize the inclusion of women who are currently underrepresented in both energy and sectors workspace as well as the decision-making processes. So just like I think Abhishek have also mentioned that there needs to develop mechanisms to guarantee the maintenance of the gender equality and social inclusion assessments and the evaluation processes as well. There is a need to perhaps also, we saw a recommendation coming that there might perhaps could be a minimum quota for women in the village communities. Then I think Dr. Khalid very rightly pointed about the policy frameworks and institutional support coming from. I mean, we have to look at different special financing mechanisms, how they can actually be adopted, such as the Just Energy Transition partnerships for renewable energy upscale in this area. And I think Dr. Khalid also provided some of the very other supporting schemes for upscaling the finance for renewable energy. I mean, perhaps when we actually talked about the community-based models, we actually talked about adopting the principle of subsidiarity as well and developing these feasible studies and financial models for those as well. And I think definitely, I mean, some very solid recommendations coming from when Dr. Khalid indicated how to use the climate chaos as a ladder for the sustainable energy cooperation side as well. So that's something that's again very relevant, that we have to address the I mean, the political will challenges as well, and we actually have to incentivize the whole process there. And so, I mean, definitely Dr. Hassan also serves a lot this as well. So yes, with this, some of the recommendations will definitely be getting back to you with a whole lot as well. But with this, over to you, Birgit. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Ubaid, and thank you to all the panelists for this very engaging and inspiring discussion. When Hassan mentioned the very well-known Chinese proverb, may you live in interesting times, I think we definitely live in interesting times. And if you quote the Chinese on one side, I would like to answer with a Greek quote, which says, "Polemos pater panton." It actually means war or crisis is the father of all things. In that respect, it means crisis is a driver of change. And I think in that respect, this is a huge crisis for South Asia, for the whole world. It's actually a big question which is laid in front of us in terms of how we define our future development in a more sustainable way, our livelihood, and also our prosperity, our personal well-being. And I think in that respect, South Asia, or the SAARC countries, as we've discussed them, unfortunately is one of the least integrated regions in the world. But we are all neighbors. And if you travel these countries, I think culturally and also with the challenges, we are sometimes more similar than we think. In governance issues and economic issues as well, obviously there are with regional, the rural-urban divide, and also with the struggles that marginalized communities have. I do not only want to restrict it to the gender issue. Yes, women belong to these vulnerable marginalized groups, but there are others as well. And it might be ethnic, it might be religious minorities, it might be socially disadvantaged groups who normally bear the brunt of accessibility to opportunities, whether it's economic, whether it's access to food or energy as well. And in that respect, I think this issue, as Hassan already mentioned, we will still need to live for a long time with an energy mix, trying to combine fossil fuels intelligently with renewables, and also increasing, obviously, the portion of renewables. The target would obviously be like having the most possible portion of renewables. But at the same time, I mean, we've also had it in the discussion that even the so-called renewable or clean energies come at an environmental cost. I mean, Harshi mentioned the wind parks, and I think one of the most well-established renewable energy sources is hydropower. And I mean, also establishing hydropower plants comes at a cost for the environment. First of all, in the area where you actually establish such a power plant. And then at the same time, we've also, due to climate change, experienced changes in the rain patterns in all our regions. Now the monsoon season looks completely different. And that obviously means that suddenly also the hydropower plants couldn't provide us the energy which we're supposed to have. We know that with the barrages, we had it in Pakistan. I think India now is also experiencing huge unexpected rainfalls, with then in the end in the Punjab basin then releasing the surplus water into the rivers, which are normally pretty, let's say, low-level rivers, and then causing again floods now in Punjab areas in Pakistan. Last year we had unexpected floods in Pakistan in areas where we normally don't have it. So there's lots of things that come with it. And I mean, you just remember the discussion, which is already a traditional one between in Pakistan, the provinces of Punjab and Sindh, about barrages and the water supply. And so there is a cost to that as well. And we've seen it's multifaceted. It's a huge governance issue as well. It's an issue of centralized governance versus local solutions. It's a technical, it's a financial one. And I think the real solution is actually in diversity in a way, like involving as many actors as possible, and also decentralizing the issue. I think for the multiple realities that we have in our region and also within our own countries, centralized solutions and even centralized power grids very often will not actually be a feasible solution for the various realities and simply the geographical differences which we have within our countries. And in that respect, I feel that this issue of involving local communities, developing smart, decentralized solutions, and also the issue of moving away from having this 60% dependency on the international markets for your energy production is a huge issue. And you would need to diversify in that respect as well. I think otherwise we will not be able to actually satisfy the multiple needs of the growing population here in South Asia. And I think especially also the decentralization issue and involving more stakeholders, it's crucial actually to actually fulfill the needs of the people and also level out certain challenges which you might have with excessive government control on a supranational or a national level. I think there's no one size fits all. And that also comes with financing and investment. And I think there might be one thing that will be hugely unpopular in the current time, but I think also people need to know that energy also comes with a cost. So, I mean, it needs to be a fair cost that reflects the production, but also the impact that energy production has on sustainability, on the environment, and on economic production. So I think there's also an economic equation here that we need to get properly integrated into a sustainable future solution for the various segments here and realities in South Asia. So in that respect, I think we've had, let's say, lots of food for thought in this discussion. I thank you all very much, and I'm very interested in seeing what the final publication, where we all sum up the discussions that we've had over these talks, what this will look like. And we'll be very happy to share it with the technical and the public audience, with policy makers, as this is the ultimate objective in contributing to a future-oriented discussion on a really strategic issue for the development of this region. So thanks a lot to all of you.
Yes, thank you so much, Birgit, and thank you to all the speakers for the wonderful interventions and spending the time. So there are a lot of recommendations coming forward, and I think we will definitely get back to you with a set of recommendations coming out of it in the form of a report, and we hope that to be forwarded to the relevant stakeholders in the most succinct manner possible. Yes, apologies, we're 25 minutes above the time. So I think just ending with Asad Mahmood Saab's comment that let's all unite and strive to keep our planet's hope alive journey in South Asia's journey towards brighter, cleaner, and greener land. So once again, thank you so much.
Whether can I use this opportunity of 1 minute left? So I just want to say, despite the the knowledge swapping that we do, I think we must also focus on knowledge creation at this point of time. And I agree to what Bridget said about one size fit all not sitting, but on the financing aspect, I think, and based on the challenges, vis-a-vis the challenges, I think one size can fit all if there is a commitment from our strong partners and perhaps countries which are more developed than us.
So much, Dr. Aslam. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you. Bye. Have a good time.
Well, thanks.